Yes, it's me, Sean D'Souza, and I'm going to show you how to use watercolors. The first thing that you have to remember with watercolors is, well, you want to make sure that all your colors are, like here there's a green, and that's blue, and different shades of blue, and then I go to orange, pink, red, maroon, brown. So you want to go in those kind of shades. When I first started out, I didn't know that. And so I created a big mess, and I'll show you my previous one. That's my other palette, and let me just show it to you. So if you notice, it starts off here with green, and then there's blue, and there's another green, and then every time I kind of try to mix here, I get some of that green on the yellow ochre, and it's a big mess. And so it's all over the place. There's yellow ochre here, and then there's blue, and there's red. It's all over the place. So when you look at all the colors, there's no consistency. However, when you look at this palette, what you've got is, we start off with phthalo green, or whichever green you've got, and then the blues. And you don't have to have all of these colors, but you want to make sure that you have the colors so that they don't start mixing in each other, so you don't have a very dark color right next to something like yellow ochre, which is here. So you don't have that green next to the yellow ochre, which is what I had originally. And that's just so that you can lay out your palette. Now the second thing is that it needs to be, your stuff needs to be like as if it were toothpaste. So because watercolor is so expensive, in certain cases people tend to put just a little bit, they squeeze a little bit in their palette here, and you can't do that. You need to have a lot of it so that you can kind of use a lot of it, and then you can start to mix the color. So this part, this section, has to be like as if you're putting toothpaste on your tube. See, there's quite a bit of it in it already, and you want that to be the case. The third thing you want to make sure is that, and this is just my water jug. It's nothing fancy, it's just a takeaway thing. Look at it there. There's nothing fancy about it. But the third thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have, when you're mixing it, that there is enough water. So, what I'm doing here is putting water. And then I can put in something like orange, and now I've got enough, not so much water, but enough to get that painting going, because this is watercolors, it's not dry colors. If I were to just do it without any watercolors or without enough water, it would be like that. It would be dry. It would get drier and drier and thicker, more like what you're seeing here. It would be thick. And when I put that on the paper, it dries too quickly. So you need to have a bit of water going. And so I'm going to just put in some more here. Even if they mix a bit, doesn't matter because we can gradate them. And let me just show you then how I will use this on the paper itself. So I'll get the paper. Right, and now what I'm really doing is this is what I'm doing. I start off, this is what I never learned when I first started out. I want to make sure that I've got this bead, what we call the bead, okay? So you can see that bead of water running like that. So there's that bead of water, and I'm just pushing the bead. All I'm doing is pushing it down. So this one, see, this is always full of water, and I'm just pushing it down. I'm not going over it a million times. I'm just pushing it, and it keeps going down, and it keeps going down. And as long as this portion is wet, it's fine. When this portion gets dry, I'm in trouble. So I keep pushing the water down, and that's it. And you're starting to get a wash. Now, if I were to put some of the reddish tinge that I had earlier, then that wash turns a little reddish. See that? But this is always dry. I'll show you what happens when it gets wet. Or sorry, when it gets, this is always wet. When it gets dry, what happens? So I'm gonna really mop up this brush. I just use this kind of thing, just a little sponge, and I mop it up. You can use paper towels. I've used paper towels. It's been a mess, but yeah, you just use. So now it's dry. Look, this is the problem now. As soon as I start pushing, it gets all, you know, the nice gradation that we were getting is going away because there's too much dryness. If this is the end of the sheet, then it's fine if you're going to mop it up. But otherwise, you tend to get, like I'll show you, some people tend to do this, right? So they're doing, and then they're mixing it, and then they're mixing it, and it gets all muddy and it gets terrible. And really what you're focusing on is just to make sure that you don't lose this stuff. So I'm going from, look at this. I'm just making sure that I have this bead going, and then the bead, you call it a whale, you call it a bead, it doesn't really matter. And it keeps going down. And that's it. And when you're done and you think, okay, that's enough, I've had enough, then make sure that the brush is really dry, and then you just touch it up like that, and it's gone. You go back, make sure the brush is really dry, and touch it up, and you're gone. And that's it. And really that's what you've got to practice. So I'm going to show you approximately how I do that with a drawing here. So when you look at these drawings, for instance, what you notice is that they've got a wash at the back. So the background has a wash, and that wash was created simply by making sure that you had that kind of, you know, just a little background. So okay, when you're doing your painting, there are two things you want to know. The first thing is how to get a cauliflower, which you don't want to do, but you want to do the wrong thing as well, right, when you're learning. So I'm going to put in some paint here, just orange for instance. You can put in any color, it doesn't really matter. And lots of liquid, as you can see, not too much liquid, but not too little. How much is too much? We don't have a teaspoon ratio here. You have to decide, and you have to work it out. So I'm going to put the paper right over, and notice that, again, I've got the paper at a little angle because the watercolor needs to flow. So because I'm using this thick brush, it holds a lot of liquid, see? So I can just mop up this liquid here, and it's all sitting in the brush, and that's the beauty of this brush. And so if I keep going down, and notice what I'm doing, I'm not going back up here, I'm not going back up here, I'm just pushing this bead downwards, left to right, left, right, and we're going down. And of course there's too much water there because I'm not focusing, but you'll have some of these problems when you start, and you'll just learn how to control them, right? Maybe you can change the angle of the paper and you won't have that run. Now the thing is that, see, there's all this liquid here. If I will leave this liquid here, what's going to happen is eventually it will create what is called the cauliflower. It'll create a cauliflower. So what is a cauliflower? A cauliflower looks like this. Let me get a picture. So you see this little patch here? That's because when the drawing was finished, it was just left there. There was too much moisture, too much liquid, and when that thing dries up, it'll be a cauliflower. So if we don't want it to be a cauliflower, what we need to do is, and I'm going to take some other stuff here. I've got enough liquid here. You're drawing and it's not flat. You're always making sure that you're at an angle. So I'm pushing the liquid, 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 pushing the liquid. And that's really what you're doing. You need to learn how to push from left to right, left to right. And now, as I reach the end, I'm just dabbing my thing on a paper towel or a sponge, and I'm just touching it. Look, it's just sucking up the liquid. I'm just touching it. I'm not pushing, I'm not doing anything. It's as if it were like a suction, like a vacuum. It's just sucking it up, look. And I dab it, sucking. It's just touching and sucking. And that's the beauty. And that one is not going to turn into a cauliflower. So we'll look at it shortly, both of them. And you'll notice that one of them is a cauliflower and the other one isn't a cauliflower. And the reason is because of the way we've handled it. In fact, if you look at it already, it started to dry here. And I'm going to dab this anyway, it's too much liquid. And when you look closely, you'll notice it's cauliflowered here in this area. And here, it's all patchy. Whereas this has no cauliflowers. All that stuff that you see, that's just the grain of the paper. Whereas this is all patchy. And that has created an effect like this one. So if you don't want an effect like that, then you need to make sure that when you reach the end, or wherever it is, that you just dab it up. And you're just sucking it like that, just by holding it there, not by doing anything else. Now this is fine with a brush like that. Later on you'll learn how to use a thinner brush. But when you're doing washes, a thin brush is going to run out of liquid pretty quickly. So see that I'm already running out of liquid. And if I continue to use a thin brush, I'm in trouble, because that's when I get an uneven gradation. Now the thing is, my hand has got a little more practiced, and so it's a little hard for me to goof it up, but you will find that you can consistently goof it up if you run out of liquid, especially because of a thin brush. Now that doesn't mean that a thin brush is not good, it just means that you are not practiced enough, and so you start off with a thick brush so that you've got enough liquid. Also, when you need to mop it up, the thick brush is much better. So start off with a thick brush. Some people use this kind of brush, the flat brush, but I would say start off with this brush. I still don't use the flat brush so much, so start with the rounded mop brush like this, and you'll do fine. Let's look at that picture again, and you'll notice that's some serious cauliflowers, and there's no cauliflower at all there. There's still a little ink to touch up. Even that one's not too bad, done with the little brush. So you'll get used to this. What I would suggest you do is deliberately create some cauliflowers and deliberately create no cauliflowers. So that way you'll learn.